By the year 1260, the Mongol Empire was the largest the world had ever seen. It stretched from the Pacific Ocean all the way to Eastern Europe. This was an empire forged in fire and blood. Genghis Khan and his successors had created an incredible war machine. Their horsemen were fast, disciplined, and utterly ruthless. They had conquered vast lands across China, Central Asia, and Russia. No army had been able to stop them. They seemed like a force of nature, a storm that swept away everything in its path. Kings and emperors had fallen and ancient cities were turned to dust. The Mongols had a reputation for total destruction, a reputation that struck fear into the hearts of all who heard their name. The Mongol war machine then turned its sights towards the heartlands of the Islamic world. Under the command of Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis, they rolled through Persia. In 1258, they committed an act that sent shockwaves across the globe. They sacked Baghdad. The great city, the center of Islamic learning and culture for 500 years, was utterly destroyed. The Caliph was killed, and its libraries were burned. The stories say the waters of the Tigris River ran black with the ink of countless books. After Baghdad, the Mongols continued their relentless march westward, conquering Syria and Aleppo. By 1260, they stood at the very gates of Egypt, the last major Islamic power left standing in the region. This Mongol advance was more than just a military invasion, it was an existential threat. For the people of the time, it felt like the end of the world was at hand. The Mongols were not just conquerors, they were destroyers of civilizations. Their arrival in the Levant brought with it a wave of terror unlike anything seen before. Refugees fled south, telling horrific stories of Mongol brutality. The message Hulagu Khan sent to the Mamluk Sultan in Egypt was clear and chilling. It demanded complete and total submission or face complete annihilation. The choice was simple: bow down and become a vassal, or be wiped off the face of the earth. At this critical moment, the fate of the region rested with the Mamluks of Egypt. The Mamluks were a unique military caste of slave soldiers, mostly of Turkic origin, who had risen to rule Egypt. They were themselves formidable warriors, known for their skill in archery and horsemanship. Their leader was Sultan Qutuz, a man who had been sold into slavery as a child by the Mongols. He understood the threat better than anyone. He was joined by a brilliant but rebellious commander named Baybars, who had also fled the Mongols. Together, these two leaders had to decide whether to surrender or to stand and fight against the most feared army on the planet. The man leading the Mongol army in the Levant was Kitbuqa Noyan. He was a veteran commander and a Nestorian Christian, trusted by Hulagu Khan. Hulagu himself had returned to Mongolia to deal with a succession crisis, taking a large part of his army with him. This left Kitbuqa with a smaller but still very powerful force. His army was a mix of Mongol horsemen and soldiers from conquered Christian kingdoms like Georgia and Armenia. Kitbuqa was confident. The Mongols had never known defeat in a major field battle. He believed that the Mamluks, like all others before them, would break and run when faced with the legendary Mongol charge. Facing this fearsome army was the Mamluk Sultan, Saif ad-Din Qutuz. His story was one of survival and incredible determination. He knew that submitting to the Mongols was not an option. To rally his emirs, many of whom were terrified and advised caution, Qutuz made a powerful speech. He reminded them of their duty to defend their faith and their people. He chose to meet the Mongol challenge head-on. He made a crucial decision by allying with his rival, the ambitious commander Baybars. Putting aside their differences, they united the Mamluk forces for the coming fight. This alliance was vital. It brought together Qutuz's authority and Baybars' military genius. The Mamluk army was a mirror image of the Mongols in many ways. Like the Mongols, they were expert horse archers who had spent their entire lives training for war. The Mamluk system created professional soldiers who were loyal to their corps and masters of cavalry tactics. However, they also carried heavier armor and lances, making them effective in close-quarters combat. Their army was smaller than the full Mongol horde, but with Hulagu gone, they were now on more even terms with Kitbuqa's force. Both armies probably numbered around 20,000 men. This was going to be a battle between two of the finest cavalry forces in the world. Qutuz decided not to wait for the Mongols to invade Egypt. He chose to be proactive. He marched his army out of Cairo and into Palestine to meet the enemy on ground of his own choosing. He selected a location known as Ain Jalut, which means the Spring of Goliath. This site in the Jezreel Valley was significant. It was believed to be the place where David had defeated Goliath. Qutuz hoped this historic setting would inspire his men. More importantly, the valley's geography was perfect for an ambush. It was surrounded by hills and forests, ideal for hiding troops and setting a trap for the unsuspecting Mongol army. The battle, fought on September 3, 1260, was a masterclass in Mamluk strategy. Qutuz knew he could not defeat the Mongols in a straightforward open-field battle. He needed to use tactics and terrain to his advantage. The plan was simple but brilliant. He would use a small part of his army led by the charismatic Baybars to lure the Mongols into a trap. Baybars and his men were tasked with engaging the Mongol vanguard and then pretending to retreat in disarray. This feigned retreat was a classic Mongol tactic, and the Mamluks planned to use it against its masters. The goal was to draw the entire Mongol army deep into the valley. As the sun rose, Baybars led the Mamluk advance guard forward. They clashed with Kitbuqa's forces, and the battle began. The Mamluk horsemen fought fiercely, firing arrows and charging, only to fall back again and again. Kitbuqa, seeing what he thought was a weak and retreating enemy, grew overconfident. He believed the Mamluks were breaking, just as so many other armies had. He ordered his entire force to charge forward in pursuit, eager to crush the enemy and secure a quick victory. He chased Baybars' retreating force right into the heart of the valley, exactly as Qutuz had planned. The trap was now set. Once Kitbuqa's army was fully inside the valley, the signal was given. Sultan Qutuz and the main body of the Mamluk army emerged from their hiding places in the surrounding hills. They crashed into the Mongol flanks, completely surrounding them. The Mongol hunters had become the hunted. The fighting was incredibly intense. The Mongols, caught by surprise, fought with their usual ferocity. At one point, the Mamluk left wing began to crumble under the pressure. Seeing this, Sultan Qutuz dramatically threw his helmet to the ground so his men could see his face. He personally led a countercharge, shouting "O Islam," rallying his men and stabilizing the line. This moment was the turning point of the battle. The Mamluks, inspired by their sultan's bravery, pushed back with renewed strength. The Mongols, trapped and outnumbered, fought to the last man, but their situation was hopeless. Their commander, Kitbuqa, refused to retreat. He was captured and brought before Qutuz, where he remained defiant to the end before being executed. The Mamluk victory was total and complete. The invincible Mongol army had finally been defeated in a major battle. The news spread like wildfire, bringing hope to a world that had lived in fear for decades. The importance of the Battle of Ain Jalut cannot be overstated. It was a pivotal moment in world history. First and foremost, it saved the Islamic heartlands from Mongol destruction. Egypt was spared the fate of Baghdad, and it became a safe haven for scholars, artists, and refugees from across the Islamic world. Cairo flourished, becoming the leading cultural and political center of the era. The Mamluk Sultanate, cemented by this victory, would go on to rule the region for over 2 centuries, preserving Islamic civilization. Had the Mamluks lost, the Mongol tide would have likely swept over Egypt, North Africa, and perhaps even into Europe. The battle shattered the myth of Mongol invincibility. For decades, the Mongols had seemed like an unstoppable force of nature. Ain Jalut proved that they were mortal and could be beaten by a well-led, disciplined army, using clever strategy. This psychological victory was immense. It showed that resistance was possible. Strategically, the battle taught a crucial lesson. Never underestimate your enemy, but also never underestimate the power of good leadership, careful planning, and using the terrain to your advantage. Qutuz and Baybars demonstrated that a smaller force could defeat a stronger one by turning the enemy's own tactics against them. Sadly, the alliance between the victors did not last. On the triumphant journey back to Cairo, Sultan Qutuz was assassinated in a plot led by his ambitious partner, Baybars. Baybars then seized power and became the new sultan. Despite this internal betrayal, Baybars would go on to be one of the greatest Mamluk rulers. He spent his reign pushing the remaining Crusaders and Mongols out of Syria, securing the legacy that began at Ain Jalut. He consolidated Mamluk power and ensured the long-term survival of the state that had stopped the Mongol advance in its tracks. Today, the Battle of Ain Jalut is remembered as a symbol of successful resistance against overwhelming odds. It stands as a testament to the idea that courage and strategy can overcome brute force. For the Islamic world, it marks the moment the tide was turned back, preserving its cultural and religious heart. In the grand narrative of history, Ain Jalut is not just a battle, it is a critical turning point. It drew a line in the sand that altered the course of empires and ensured the survival of a civilization, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire people to this day.